So here's what happens when a volcano erupts. You get an eruption column like this one from Mount Pinatubo in 1991, which reached 35 kilometers into the sky. Pyroclastic flows that race down the flanks of the volcano at over 100 kilometers per hour, and lava flows that ooze out from the side of the mountain at a more leisurely pace. But while these features are familiar to anyone who's ever seen pictures of an active volcano, there is another feature of volcanic eruptions that might be less familiar to you: a cloud of ash that gets lofted up into the atmosphere and spread around the world by wind currents. Ash from a massive eruption can linger in the air for years, blocking sunlight and cooling the planet. And if enough ash falls to the ground in a particular place, it can bury an entire city. In fact, that's how the Roman city of Pompeii was discovered in 1748. A farmer's digging in his field when he hits something hard, a piece of Roman brick. Soon after, people realized that his farm was sitting on the remains of an ancient city. But because they didn't have any context for understanding what they had found, they just started stealing things. It took decades for people to realize that the artifacts being dug up were actually from the same culture and time period, and even longer for them to stop looting the site. But we have learned a lot since then. In 2023, scientists are working to map the lost city using new technologies. And it's not the only place we're using archaeology to explore the impact of volcanic eruptions. Hi, it's me, and this is my channel. Today, we're going to talk about the Pompeii Effect. The Pompeii Effect refers to the ability of volcanic eruptions to bury cities under ash and pumice so quickly that people don't have time to escape or even leave behind much physical evidence of their existence. The term was coined in 2000 by archaeologist Giuseppe Maniscalco, who was excavating the Roman city of Herculaneum when he noticed that people were more interested in the better preserved Pompeii. That's probably because Pompeii was buried by a thick layer of ash after Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, whereas Herculaneum was hit by a pyroclastic flow that burned everything in sight. So most of the buildings in Herculaneum are gone and few artifacts remain. Now, to be fair, both sites are amazing. Like in Herculaneum, you can literally see the outlines of people who were turned to ash by the intense heat. But archaeologists know that studying Pompeii gives us a unique window into life during the Roman Empire, whereas Herculaneum was mostly just a resort town. We learn more from the big cities, like Rome itself, where excavations have revealed layers upon layers of history. And that brings us back to the Pompeii Effect. Because while it's true that small towns like Herculaneum can teach us a great deal, really our best sources of information about past societies are cities. Cities are where complex social interactions happen, like trade, governance, religion, and war. So it makes sense that cities are such popular archaeological sites. The problem is that cities also tend to be big, which means excavations take a long time, are expensive, and can destroy the very structures they're trying to preserve. Take the Colosseum in Rome, for example. After centuries of neglect, the Italian government finally started excavating the site in 1809. But almost immediately, construction crews started taking apart the ruins to use the stone for other building projects. It wasn't until 1874 that the Italian government passed laws protecting archaeological sites. But that still leaves a lot of potential sites unexcavated, especially in places like Italy and Greece, where people have been living and building on top of ancient cities for thousands of years. And that's where the Pompeii Effect comes in. Instead of spending decades excavating a site, scientists are now able to use remote sensing technologies to find buried cities without ever having to dig. One technique they use is called electrical resistivity imaging, or ERI. With this technique, scientists create maps of the underground by sending small electrical currents into the ground through metal electrodes. They then measure how long it takes for the current to pass through different parts of the site. Because water conducts electricity more easily than dry soil, scientists can use these readings to identify underground water and create maps showing variations in soil composition. These maps can reveal things like ancient roads, walls, and even toilets. Other techniques involve bouncing radar waves into the ground or flying drones with laser rangefinders to map topography. But no matter what technique they use, the goal is always the same: to identify potential archaeological sites without disturbing them. Of course, these technologies aren't perfect. For example, soil scientists recently used ERT to map the ancient Greek city of Philippi in northern Greece. They identified several large structures that could be the remains of public buildings like temples. But the only way to confirm that would be to dig. So for now, these are just possibilities. Still, it's only a matter of time before scientists identify undiscovered cities using the Pompeii effect. And once they do, there are all kinds of things they can learn from these sites. For example, we already know that the eruption at Pompeii happened in 2 phases. The first phase was relatively small, but the second phase was nearly 40 times more powerful. Scientists think the second eruption caught people by surprise, which is why so many of them died. But the city itself had shown signs of instability for years before the eruption, like earthquakes and hot springs. So studying the built environment, artifacts, and even the vegetation around Pompeii can help us understand how people perceive the risk of living in a volcanic region. Similarly, in 1991, Mount Pinatubo roared back to life after more than 300 years. The eruption was so powerful that it ejected 3 billion cubic meters of ash and pumice, which fell on nearby cities like Metro Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Ash-covered rooftops, streets, and even people's skin. Scientists think that at least 700 people died in the eruption. But there is a lot that we don't know about what life was like in the weeks and months following the eruption. How did the ash affect people's health? How did it impact food production? And how did the government respond to the disaster? Scientists hope that studying the Pompeii effect will help them answer questions like these. And that's not all. Studying the Pompeii effect is also helping scientists understand the impact of volcanic eruptions on human societies across time. Eruptions come in all shapes and sizes, and scientists are still learning about the relationship between eruptions, ash dispersal, and the environments and societies that they affect. The Pompeii effect is helping them better understand that relationship so that we can prepare for future disasters. Take Indonesia, for example. Indonesia sits on the infamous Ring of Fire, and the country has been hit by thousands of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions in the past several hundred years. Scientists are using the Pompeii effect to study how people lived in areas affected by past eruptions, because that knowledge can help them make better land use recommendations for the future. For example, on the island of Java, scientists are excavating the remains of the city of Yogyakarta, which was destroyed by a massive eruption from Mount Merapi in 1006. By studying the layout of the city and the types of artifacts people left behind, scientists are learning how people adapted to living in the shadow of an active volcano. Their findings will help inform decisions about where people should live in the region today. It's a delicate balance because humans and volcanoes can coexist. For example, Mount Vesuvius is still an active volcano, but it also has one of the largest urban areas in the world built right at its base. And Mount Merapi is one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world, but hundreds of thousands of people still live on its slopes. So the Pompeii effect is not just helping us discover new sites, it's also helping us understand the risks and benefits of living in volcanic regions, and teaching us how to build safer cities in the future. It's a great example of how we can use the past to solve problems today. Thank you for watching. Hope you learned something new. If you did, please follow and leave a like. And as always, thanks for watching.